Hello, Shan. How are you? How are you? It's been what, like over a year since we've talked to each other.
Yes, hi. It's been a little while, too long, I think. Doing well, thank you. Doing very well indeed. How are you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I got COVID about a month and a half ago, 8 weeks ago, and I mean, I must say it was horrible for about a week.
Mhm.
I was really not functioning at all, and I think after the second week, it kind of got back to normal. I think, but it took me about a month
Mhm.
to kind of get over it, essentially.
You feeling
Um,
better now?
oh yeah, back to normal, I guess. Back to normal.
Okay, good,
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. And then there's this whole thing about long COVID. Like I saw a
Mm.
patient the other day, and she had some eye problems, and I said, well, how are you doing? And the first thing she said, oh, I've got long COVID,
Right, okay.
and I was like, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, that's what I have, long COVID, and it was a GP who said, yes, you've got long COVID, just to deal with this kind of myriad of fatigue and just feeling crap, really.
Mm. Well,
Um,
I'm hoping the GP would have excluded other things through history examination and tests, etc. But yes, I think it's about 1 in 10 cases end up with long COVID. And yeah, it can be pretty devastating, pretty severe.
I mean, I don't know
I've got
much about it.
fast.
Could you kind of tell us more about it? Because I don't know much about long COVID at all.
Well, I think that what's important to remember is even the world's top experts in this field are still learning about this condition. So it's important that we have that understanding before I share my relatively small experience of it. But yeah, it can be pretty devastating. People, I think it's about 3 months after you've had diagnosed COVID, if symptoms persist, and it can be anything from general aches, tiredness, fatigue, breathlessness on exertion, headaches, and just really not feeling yourself. Um, and there's not really a great deal that we can presently do about it, other than giving advice in terms of lifestyle and resting and hydrating and not overdoing it at work, trying to de-stress, relax, etc. But yes, it's certainly quite a debilitating condition, and I think that we do need to look into it a bit further.
And previously there was this pathway that there'll be special long COVID clinics to sort of deal with these issues, and now I think they've scrapped that, and they're getting GPs to sort of deal with it now.
Yes, I'm not sure. We don't have a long COVID clinic in our area. I'm glad to hear that they are opening up, but I suspect much of the care will be through general practice and primary care. And I think it really would need to be multidisciplinary, looking at not only physical sides, but the emotional side of people feeling like this. It must be pretty devastating to go from being fit and well to suddenly struggling to walk a few yards as a result of this condition. So there's a lot of psychological elements to that as well that can certainly play a part.
No, I'm just thinking of the actual the label, whether it's beneficial or not, because it is it's current, it's a current issue.
Yeah, labels will come and go. They're calling it long COVID now. They'll probably call it something else sooner or later. Who knows? I don't think it's an inappropriate label at this time, but I think I'm more important in how we can help the condition rather than labeling people about it. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, okay, I've seen 3 patients with long COVID, and they wanted us to exclude any ophthalmic manifestations with it, and there's no ocular manifestations. But I don't know. I mean, as you said, it's a new condition. And it's something that we're kind of. I mean, I think we're sort of making up as we go along. which has been the situation with COVID anyway, because it is quite new.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I feel.
Yeah, I think time will tell as we start to learn more about it. Then we'll hopefully improve our management of it over time.
I mean, is it something, previously coronaviruses, didn't have such a an audience, and now it does. Mm-hmm. So, in any condition, if you give it a lot of attention and a lot of studying time into it, you find that it actually has all kinds of manifestations.
Yes, and I think that the symptoms I've covered were probably just the tip of the iceberg, and there'll be more that come out in time. So it's yes, it's going to be challenging, and I think it's important that we do what we can to rise to that challenge.
And what do you think the biggest challenges are right now, for general practitioners in the current health situation?
Oh gosh, where to begin? I think that the challenges we have, an extension of the challenges we had pre-COVID, they haven't gone away, and if anything, they may well have got worse. We've got a lot of problems with workload, recruitment, retention. Some of these problems were eased by one or two interventions that were performed centrally, such as CQC suspending inspections. They've now resumed them. Appraisals were suspended, they're now resumed. But yes, we've still got a lot of problems with doctors leaving. There's hype in the news about how we've actually got more doctors, but this is false. If you look at the full-time equivalent, we've lost 19% of our GPs in the last 5 years. And that means that the remaining 81% are doing the rest of the work. So, we are stretched within on the ground. We've also had some fairly unpleasant media coverage in terms of what we have been doing during the pandemic. Some false media reports claiming that GPs are closed when in fact we have been open, and we haven't really worked as hard as we have at the moment. And I have had concerns that this has led to a narrative that you can't see a GP, and people therefore holding on to severe symptoms that need to have urgent investigation because they believe this fake story. So yeah, a group of friends and me contacted various media sources to actually try and correct this falsehood that's been out there. But it's kind of sad that it's been left to ground GPs to do this, to having to address these issues. It should really come centrally, and it's a message we still put across there that your GP is open. They might not need to see you face to face, and they're doing their best to do remote consultations wherever possible for everybody's protection. But if they feel that you need to be seen, then they will arrange to see you. And it's important that we keep to get that message out there.
Why do you think there is this kind of narrative from mainstream media that GPs are not doing the work, or it's sort of it's a great time to be a GP in 2021?
I don't know. I think it goes back to 2004 when GPs negotiated a new deal through the Department of Health, and income was improved, hours were reduced. And that's where this story arose that there were GPs that were earning six-figure salaries and not doing much work, which was actually false. I became a GP in 2007. And since then, we've actually had more and more work to do with less and less remuneration. So, working harder for less money, and with inflation, it doesn't go as far. So it's actually gone quite far the other way now, yet the narrative has still existed that GPs are loaded fat cats on the golf course, which really nothing could be further from the truth. And it can be quite hurtful at times. There was a statistic that came out a few months ago saying that GPs are twice as likely to face abuse than hospital doctors. And, we've had stories about attacks on general practices inside and outdoors, graffiti. There was an arson attack on a practice nearby. And I'm not saying it's driven by the media, but it's certainly driven by a false narrative. And that's something that really needs to change.
Is it because it's sort of an easier target? or it's a target that can be abused or downtrodden on?
I wouldn't know why we would be perceived as an easier target than anyone else in the healthcare sector. So I'm not really sure the answer to that. But it's certainly got to the point where it's become quite intolerable, quite insufferable now. You know, we've got 1 in 3 GPs that admit to having to resort to alcohol or drugs or prescription medications just to help get through their day. 24% of GPs report stress and mental health conditions rising directly from their workload. And it's all pretty terrifying, bearing in mind how few of us there are left, whilst our population is getting sicker and has greater healthcare needs. So I do fear for the future of the profession, and that's one of the reasons why I've decided to stand for the GPC elections, to see if we can help to reverse some of these rather worrying trends.
I mean, you know, talking about your, you know, associations and GP groups, you know, obviously you think something needs to be done there, otherwise you won't be standing to be elected. Is there a big shortcoming from their side?
I don't know if I would directly hold the GPC entirely responsible, but I think that there is, across the board, there's been an approach where we seem to be quite accepting of an increasing workload, and we seem to say, okay, well, that's fine, just we'll do it, we'll take care of it, we'll brush it off, and just, you know, kind of shaking off these problems and getting on with it. And unfortunately, it's reached the stage where we've now just got so much workload upon our shoulders, so much bureaucratic interference, and in combination of that, so much stress that comes with it, that it's reached the point where we're just starting to lose these doctors. You know, there's 40% of GPs have said that they're going to leave by the time the pandemic is over, just because they just can't be bothered with it anymore. And that is absolutely terrifying. That could well be the end of our profession, because I don't think the rest of us could sustain the workload. So, you know, I don't know if I, as a single person, can reverse this all by myself, but I do think that we need to have a stronger voice out there that's really supporting what we're doing and championing the work we do, and to hopefully start to change this narrative and get some better recognition publicly.
So, I mean, what are the 3 top things that you change, you know, if you were elected into the powers be?
Ooh, the 3 top things. I think one of the biggest ones will be looking at workload and how we can ease the workload that's placed upon us, because it's just rising, and there's no sign of it falling in any way at all. So that urgently needs to be addressed.
How would you do that?
The second thing would be, how would you do that? There's a lot of unnecessary work that is passed on to GPs that could be done elsewhere. A lot of secondary care work that is unfairly passed down to GPs, when in actual fact, contractually, it should be completed by them. Lots of other services that should be able to be accessed without needing to involve a GP should be, people should be able to self-refer into them. You know, we had a case where a patient goes to see an optician and says, you've got cataracts, go and see your GP to get referral to ophthalmologist. Well, why do you need to see a GP? The GP can't confirm the cataracts or the extent of them. It's just going to be a situation where they fill out a form and send the referral off. So that's one thing that could be better. Self-referral into community mental health services. So many things. I could talk quite at length about all of this, but I don't want to bore you. But I think there are some many simple ways that we could reduce the workload that's upon us.
And other examples where GP practices have kind of dealt with these ways of reducing workload levels. You know,
examples we have in our practice, we've recently got direct access physiotherapy, which has made a tremendous difference. People who are coming in with general aches, pains, backache, neckache, etc. And yes, of course, you know, we're happy to see them if we can help to exclude any other causes, but much of the time, a physiotherapy appointment is the preferred option, and they can see and assess and form a clinical impression and determine if, in fact, the GP is needed or not. So it can make a tremendous difference to our working day and to our workload. About 40% of the cases we see are mental health problems. And I'm not saying that they can all be sent directly to mental health services. Sometimes they do need to come to us first and foremost, but having direct access to that for patients where they could self-refer, again, would make a tremendous difference to our workload. But I think mental health services themselves are rather stretched at the moment, so we've got to look at how we can support them better as well.
And there are roles for physician associates and coaches and psychologists and psychotherapists,
pharmacists
as well, and counselors and sort of other allied healthcare professionals. And I think maybe that's something that it's happening at the moment. I know in a number of GP practices where they have brought in other allied healthcare professionals. And even administrators just do all the paperwork and fill out all the forms and so on, which are superfluous in the first place. But it's winning us off these these old systems.
Yeah, very much so.
I mean, do you think that's likely to happen sort of over the next sort of 5-10 years, or is it sort of?
I want it to happen.
On the leadership.
Yeah, it depends on leadership. I really do desperately want it to happen because I'm seeing what's happening on the front line, and seeing doctors in tears, struggling physically and emotionally with the workload and how they're coping, whilst also getting home, reading the newspapers and seeing what's being said about us, or even just going on Twitter or social media and seeing some of the anti-GP comments that are going around there that are very much based around falsehoods. I think that narrative just needs to change, because ultimately I do believe it's contributing to our GPs leaving the profession, and we can't allow that to continue, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was in medical school, back in the 90s, becoming a GP was a good job. It was okay. Do I want to have a good time or do I want to have a hard time? If I wanted a hard time, I stay in hospital, become a surgeon. If I want to have a good time, it was GP. And I loved the rotations there at the time because it was so relaxed.
What I loved about it, one thing I noticed was I would meet GPs when I was a junior doctor, and they not only seemed very bright and very intelligent, they could talk about many different medical conditions, but there was also a slightly rebellious streak about them that they were their own people. They were going to do their own thing. They were going to manage the patients the way they felt best, and there was something very sort of liberating about being in their presence. And that's what drew me into it, really, just because I would see a lot of hospital doctors, and many of their attitudes were tired and grumpy and frustrated and aggressive and angry. And I thought, I do not want to be like that when I grow up. But GPs just seem to be more pragmatic and more calm and collected. And I thought, well, that could be more along the lines of what I'm seeking. Plus the fact that we have such a variety of so many different things that can present to us, literally anything can come off the street and come in and see a GP, and any condition, I should say, from an individual. And we've got to be on our A game to really recognize what that is, what if there's a medical diagnosis underlying it, and how we can help manage them.
Yeah, and obviously you are a rebellious individual, and I don't think that's
only since I met you, really.
Yeah, right. So. Yeah, it is a difficult one. It is a difficult one because we're constantly bombarded by procedure and regulation, and that sort of autonomous existence is kind of dwindling at the moment.
It is, yes. This is something that I think we've spoken about personally before, maybe not on record, but the rise of pathways, policies, protocols, and procedures almost starts to eliminate the need for the individual clinician to actually make an assessment. And maybe that's why we've got the rise of these automated softwares and artificial intelligence that can supposedly reach a diagnosis. But I don't think they're ever going to be able to substitute the human touch, in terms of delivering empathy and compassion and understanding and support to a patient, which is much of the time what is needed above all else in many cases. So I'm hopeful that we can start to be a bit more human about this rather than looking at a tick box exercise. One of the things that I've battled with our CCG about is by pointing out that not everything neatly fits into your little tick box pro forma. You know, it's not that simple, and you guys need to understand that and give us a bit more freedom to express ourselves as doctors when it comes to managing patients.
So if you were to have a slogan for your campaign, what would it be?
None of the above. No, it wouldn't. I think enough's enough, really. And I'm just, frankly, I'm just tired of sitting on the sidelines and just watching what's happening to our practice, our partners and our general practitioners lose their autonomy and increasingly start to feel suffocated by not only the amount of work, but the amount of regulation and bureaucracy that they have to battle every single day, whilst also having to address this very negative public narrative. I think, you know, if we take something like appraisals and revalidation, for example, to things that have absolutely no scientific evidence to support their use, yet seem to persist 15, 20 years later, why are we still doing these arduous exercises in bureaucracy that are extremely expensive and ultimately take us away from patient care?
So, having finished about all the stuff that's not working, is there anything that's working in GP practice right now in 2021?
I think what's working really well, and I've seen this particularly during COVID, is how teams are coming together more and looking out for each other more, and support each other, and just checking in and saying, you know, are you okay? How are you really feeling? You know, do you want to have a chat? Let's talk about this. And just really sort of taking care of each other's needs. I think, you know, it's quite clear that we're not being taken adequate care of by the Department of Health. We do have to look to ourselves. I'm hopeful that, you know, things will start to get better and people will recognize the incredible work that has been done across primary and secondary care over the last year. You know, it's quite interesting because despite many people being publicly attacked within the profession, it's GPs that have been leading the vaccination campaign. You know, we've got almost 23 million people in the UK that have now received their first COVID vaccine, which is terrific, and that's on top of the existing work we already have to do. And I think that's something that really needs to be celebrated. I was working at a vaccination clinic yesterday, and the lady in charge, I knew her. She's actually a Parkinson's specialist nurse, very, very qualified, extremely intelligent, and I've known of her for about 15 years. And she is running the clinic. She's in charge of the entire clinic in terms of management and making sure that everyone knows what they're doing and it's all flowing well. And I thought, my gosh, aren't we lucky to have these kind of people working within the NHS, where you can take someone who is so specialized in terms of care for Parkinson's patients, take them out of that and bring them in to run this as at a managerial level. And not only that, but do an incredible job where they're vaccinating, you know, over 1,000 people every day. And that's something I think we really need to protect. I don't think you'd find that in the private sector.
Yeah, and it's very inspirational. And, you know, these are the kind of stories that actually raises the spirits of the population.
Yeah, it does. It's something we should really be proud of, and it's something we should do everything we can to protect.
And you know, then go on.
I was just going to say, this is a very serious conversation. We don't tend to get this serious normally.
Well, you know, this is the conversation we're having. I mean, we can have a silly conversation, but you know, it is a time of people having to come together, and you know, we are in the middle of a big pandemic, so hopefully, you know, coming out the other side, and but it's lessons that we have to learn from them.
Absolutely.
You know, otherwise, not much will change. But you know, people like to read sensational stories, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And you know, you've got Meghan and her sensational story, and
nice distraction, isn't it?
yeah, it's a nice distraction. I mean, it's interesting.
Maybe not nice, but it's certainly a distraction.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think you know, her net worth is not as high as the net worth of the royal family. So, you know, she is trying to increase her net worth, and the best way to do that is to be on primetime TV and on all the newspapers. I mean, that's my crude analysis of things.
I don't know. Someone, a good friend of mine, actually posted something on Facebook today saying that you know, imagine you're a GP, and Megan comes in to see you, and she's your patient, and she expresses these problems that, you know, she's in a family that's, you know, they've taken her passport and her driver's license, and she's asked for help because she's feeling suicidal and they've refused, and she feels trapped and she's not allowed to leave the house. What would you do as a GP? And, you know, one thing you certainly would not do is accuse her of making it up or call her a liar. But I thought, gosh, you know, what would you do in that situation?
Yeah, but, you know, being a GP is one thing, and being someone who uses celebrities for a living is something else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's contextual.
Well, you know, there are many opinions on
primetime TV,
mm-hmm.
sitting in a billionaire's mansion in California, you know, where it's all nicely set up,
mm-hmm.
and that's different from being a GP in, you know, in East London or in a rundown area in Derby.
Yes, but I don't think we should assume that just because they are wealthy that they should be allowed to have these problems and not have the same kind of help that other people have. And I think that's a mistake that we really shouldn't be making. You know, what they're worth and how big their house is irrelevant. You know, I've been through times in my life when I've had very little money, and other times I've had absolutely loads, but it doesn't really change my mental health. You know, there are times when I can be extremely depressed, despite being quite well off, and at times I've been extremely happy when I've had quite a lot of money problems. So it's
I mean, I understand that. I mean, I understand that. The difference that I see is that, you know, if you go to your GP talking about these problems, it's different from when you're on a show talking about your problems as well. So it's
mm-hmm.
two different situations.
Yeah.
And they both need, you know, you need to sort of analyze that. And secondly, you use different words for different situations. So I think, you know, people need to take that into context, that, you know, this has been, I mean, I think it's been calculated, and I think it's been studied, and it's been, what's the word? I mean, I wouldn't say concocted, but, you know, it has been scripted, I think, to a certain extent. That's
what were your thoughts when they? I mean, when they first got married, I was actually. I mean, I'm not a royalist at all, but I saw some positives there. That, you know, we had a strong, confident black woman from America coming into the royal family who, and I don't know her personally, but I do have friends who have worked with her, and do talk about her humanitarian spirit quite a lot. And I think, well, this is really good. This is something that we would really benefit from.
I mean, I was very happy. I mean, I was very happy for them.
And saddened that it has turned out the way it has. But then ultimately, what's most important is, you know, when people do happy, and if being happy means doing what you're doing right now in California, then go for it. You know, no judgment from me. Who am I to judge?
No, I mean, I was very happy for them, and you know, as a royal family, and for Meghan, that they've got this kind of mixture of ethnicity within a traditional old institution. So I thought it was absolutely wonderful that there is some possible change within even the most archaic of institutions. So yeah, I was really positive, and I mean, I am a kind of royal fan. I am, because I like tradition, and I like you know, old archaic stories. So, you know, and procedure and protocol. So, you know, I quite like that, actually. But seeing this change is absolutely wonderful. But then these institutions are very old, and it doesn't change anytime soon. So you do have to be of the patient type, and that only comes with greyness patients, I think. But I mean, hopefully, they can find their peace and happiness.
I hope so. I hope so. One of the things that I was quite saddened by is that it's 2021 and here we are still talking about racism. I would have hoped that by now we would have made some positive steps, but you hear these stories and accusations of racism. I always take very seriously. I don't think we should dismiss them just on the basis that we don't like the individual. It's something that needs to be investigated. It's I think if true, it's extremely sad, and I do think that we do need change there to support that. But these kind of changes, unfortunately, don't happen overnight.
I mean, have you been in situations where there has been an accusation of racism and it wasn't taken seriously?
Yes, pretty much every time I've reported it.
Really?
Yeah, and which is why I stopped reporting it, and that's the biggest obstacle to people speaking out about racist attacks or racist abuse, is that they feel that they're not believed. This is a very serious issue, and I don't know how we're going to change that, where people can actually start to feel they can come forward and be believed in the first instance. But sometimes it's difficult to prove. It's how do you really prove it when you see? I've had a consultant who was extremely nice to every white person working in as a junior doctor, and wasn't so nice to me. Was that racist? It probably was, but I can't prove it. How do I possibly prove that? I'm genuinely asking, how do I prove that?
How do you prove it? I don't know. I really don't.
And that's the challenge. That's the challenge we face.
Yeah.
I'm sure you may well have had similar experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it was always, it was because of me being an ethnic minority that always came up. And I just got on with it. It wasn't something that, I call it a fuss. It wasn't a, something to fuss about. But yeah, certainly my senior consultants used to say, "Oh no, you're not good enough," or "There's always this, there's always that." But for me, I didn't let it affect me. Obviously, it did to a certain extent, but you kind of switch it off internally.
Yeah, I was very much the same, really. I tried not to let it affect me and just get on with my work. I think what was interesting last summer after the George Floyd attack and the tragic nature of that really captured the attention of the whole world is that it actually brought up a lot of emotions within me that I felt I could now start to talk about and be taken seriously. And it's been interesting talking to certain friends about this because they had no idea that I felt this way. And they think, well, you're doing all right. You've got a nice house, and you're a doctor, and you've got a good car and a nice job. How has racism affected you? I think, gosh, where do I begin? So yeah, it's a difficult one to try and convince others that it has been challenging over the years and unfairly, and I've been through challenges that they haven't. But at the same time, you kind of don't want to make a song and dance about it.
So, what would you consider a success, or a point where you say, okay, I can close this book now?
That's a tough question. When you say close this book, what are you specifically referring to?
Racism in the workplace, or in the NHS, or in your practice?
I think in my practice, in my workplace, I'm very lucky. I've got a wonderful team, absolutely second to none, and our patients, our cohort of patients, are wonderful too. So I'm very fortunate. I've worked in other places over the years where it's not quite been that nice, and it's not so much something you can put your finger on. You just get an overall sense that something's not quite right. Kind of sixth sense that there's some degree of prejudice around here that I can't quite put my finger on. And that's the point where people can say, oh, you're imagining it, or you're being sensitive, or are you sure that's what they meant? Maybe they meant this. Okay, so now I feel like I'm being gaslit here. So I don't know. It's something that I've just, much like yourself, try and put to the back of your mind and just get on with what you have to do professionally. And when you come across that kind of obstacle that is prejudice, then you find another way. You look for a better way, or a different way to deal with whatever issue it is you have. And it would be nice if we didn't have those kind of obstacles. And I think once they're all removed, that will be when the book is finally closed.
I mean, I think we're doing well. You know, I think that we have come a long way to where
I think so too.
you know, back in the 90s and
absolutely, yeah. Well, the 70s and 80s were pretty tough from a racism point of view. I've got a 12-year-old son, and I had a chat with him recently around the time of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. We talked about racism for the first time in depth. And I asked him honestly, have you ever had any experiences of racism? And he said, no. And I said, are you sure? You know, has anyone ever said, I won't repeat the words, but has anyone ever said these kind of words to you? And he said, no. And that was obviously relieving for me to hear as a father. And I thought, well, so either we have made some progress, because by the time I was his age, I must have been involved in about 100 different racial attacks physically. But then I was a bit more of a, you know, scrapper than he is. But in terms of where we are now, either things are getting an awful lot better, or maybe I'm just sheltering him too much. Hopefully I'm not sheltering him that much and letting him, you know, find his own path in this world to some extent. But I'm quite assured that, you know, he's managed to reach the age of 12 and tells me that he hasn't thus far experienced anything, any kind of prejudice like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think things have improved. And I think you know, just the fact that we're talking about it and openly and influencing institutions is a big deal. You know, even
yes, it's taken more seriously nowadays.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, Meghan's allowed to sort of say these things against the monarchy, which is a really, really big improvement. You know, in things, whereas before it was absolutely, you know, an absolute no-no. It was just put to the back pages of I don't know, the Daily Sport. We had one guy in our class. He used to bring in the Daily Sport every day, and it always had the royals in there. I don't know if Daily Sport exists anymore.
I have no idea. I think you're asking the wrong guy.
I went to the wrong school, I think. I went to a school where the daily paper was the Daily Sport.
No, it was Viz in my school. That's what everyone would be reading.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, it was all Daily Sport and occasionally the Sun. That was sort of a high level of paper.
It was for your Tory friends, was it?
We didn't have any Tory friends. I don't have
really?
Tory friends, none whatsoever. No Tories in my school. So what's this about you? Because originally I thought you were standing for you know, something locally with the Lib Dem.
Yes, it's actually I mean, it was last year when obviously a lot of things were happening with COVID and everything, and I heard about the protests about government's decision on funding school dinners, and Marcus Rashford coming out and holding them to account and really doing some absolutely incredible work to really speak his mind and get a lot of ground level support. And I really found that quite inspiring. I thought, God, this is a 21-year-old kid. He's, you know, more than half my age, and look what he's doing. And we need more voices like this. We need more people to hold the government to account. And you know, I'm not an aggressive anti-Tory, just to be clear, and I'm certainly not a pro-Labour person. Certainly not in the last 10 years, anyway. But I just found it quite inspiring that, you know, we do have a lot of crazy decisions being made by the current government and the cabinet and the people in charge, many of whom don't appear to demonstrate a great deal of empathy and compassion for their constituents. And I thought something really needs to change here. So I got talking to a friend of mine who stood as a prospective parliamentary candidate in High Wycombe at the last general election when we all voted for Boris. And we just had a 2 or 3 hour chat about everything, really, about what's happening in the world and, say, politics, and, you know, what do we want going forward. And I made the decision then to look at the Liberal Democrat Party, which I would never have done in the past. I've never voted for them. I always thought that they were like a fringe party. But you know, there's a lot of sort of centrist qualities that they have. I've seen the Tory government move more to the right, and the Labour Party move more to the left. And I do think there's a big group in the middle who are feeling unrepresented and politically homeless, and, you know, feeling that like their voice isn't being heard. And so I thought, well, you know, why don't I just look into this further? So got talking to them and joined the party and got involved locally, and they made me vice chair, which was wonderful. We've been campaigning at grassroots level, and we got local council elections happening on the 6th of May. And I think that, you know, I think it's important to recognise that, you know, we shouldn't just take these kind of things lying down. We all have a voice. We should get out there and use it, and make sure that our opinions are heard. And if we're seeing things that are being done or actions being taken by our government, then I think it's not only a privilege to be able to speak up against it, but it's a responsibility, and we really ought to use our voices to make our thoughts clear on this.
So you're standing for 2 elections, the GPC and also council elections locally.
Yes, and I'll be honest, I don't think I've got a prayer of winning both of them. But I thought, well, let's just do it. I think if I do win both of them, then I'll need to really look at what I'm doing on a day-to-day level in practice and can cut back. But I think what's important is just getting out there and getting your voice heard and starting to institute positive change.
You know, and that's great because you've essentially found your voice, and, you know, maybe
yeah, I think I've been sort of moaning.
You know, not that you lost your mojo.
Well, actually, I think I did, and I've spent the last 3 or 4 years just moaning and complaining on Twitter about healthcare and about the government. And I think, well, this isn't really getting me anywhere. It's going to be lots of likes and followers, but so what? You know, that's not why I'm doing this. And I thought, well, if I want to do something about it, maybe I should actually step up and see if I can. The council elections was something that I had to be talked into, you know, I haven't officially started campaigning. I want to get the GPC out of the way first, and then we'll look at what's happening with the council.
And sort of what's it like, you know, stepping into the world of politics, UK politics, compared to, you know, clinical practice?
It's a bit strange because when you're working as a doctor, people have a tendency to trust you and believe you, and then when they hear that you have an interest in politics and you're looking towards doing political work, then they're a little bit less trusting, and they start to wonder if you're actually just doing it for your own ego satisfaction or whatever it is, which is certainly not why I'm doing it. And it's it's a bit strange, but I think what's important is just being me and making sure that people understand that I'm there to represent and to serve and to help. It's not about me and my ego. It's about what we can do to help others.
And talking about sort of staying central, rather than left and right. I mean, what does that mean to you, that staying central? What kind of meaning
I think
does that give you?
we can have a thriving economy whilst also keeping taxes relatively low and fair. We can support businesses. We can also have good education. We can take care of the NHS. But we can still have a good stock market. I believe that it shouldn't be an either or in politics. We can do all of that, but it just is going to involve a lot of work, a lot of collaboration and dedication. And these are things that I think we all want. I don't think anybody wants bad education or a bad NHS or a bad economy, but it seems to be like it's always been a trade-off with the political parties in the past. I've got many friends who vote Tory. And if you really talk to them at length, it will all boil down to one thing, and that is low taxes. And they don't care about anything else. Just my taxes are low, so I'm happy. So, well, the NHS is going to shit right now, and education is appalling. And look at the potholes in the road. Doesn't that matter? No, just got my low taxes, got my bit, I'm fine. And that's a very narrow view to have. Whereas the left, which is increasingly going further to the left, seems to be more about taxing the rich and helping to support the economy that way, and getting that money through to education and to health at the risk of possibly harming small businesses. And that again is not necessarily workable. So I feel there's a middle ground that we need to go down, and that's what I'm hoping to help support.
And would you be the first family member in politics, or do you have a family history of politics?
No family history of politics, just heart disease. But yeah, I would be the first, and I'm fortunate that my family have been very supportive. My younger brother's been making fun of me, as he always has for the last 40 odd years. But yeah, it's been.
Why was he saying?
Oh, stuff like, you're a politician now, so you can do this for me, you can do that for me. I said, yeah, that's not how I would work as a politician.
Well, it's not like back. I mean, that's what happens back home anyway. And you're a politician, you get things sorted and done.
Oh yeah. Well, I think it happens here to some extent, doesn't it? I'm sure it happens here as well, but that's not who I am, and I'm sure it's not who you are either.
I'm sure it doesn't happen here. I'm sure it doesn't. I mean, back home, it's all about.
I don't know. I think
how much money you give.
I think just ask Matt Hancock's pub landlord, see what he says.
Yeah, well, he's made a lot of money.
Yeah, he certainly has.
He made a lot of money and made a lot of mistakes at the same time as well.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's a different world. It's a different world, politics, and it's similar to business, because you go in thinking, right, everyone's going to trust me, everyone's going to work with me, everyone's going to agree with me, and then you go in there, and it's like you sort of start from square one.
Yeah.
Start from scratch.
Yeah.
Which is, can be frustrating, because they're used to being at the top of the pile, and now you have to start from the beginning. I mean, how do you deal with that? Because it's not so easy.
I don't know is the answer. I just think you like I've dealt with anything, probably like you've dealt with anything as well. I guess you just get on with it. You get your head down and figure out the best way to deal with it.
What are you really looking forward to in the run-up to the elections?
I'm looking forward more than anything else to lockdown being lifted and to have a degree of normality coming back. In the run-up to the elections, I'm actually quite enjoying what's happening in the GPC elections, and I'm looking forward to the outcome there. I haven't been campaigning too aggressively. It's been mostly through social media, and I think the way I see it is that I've had enough of talking about the problems and not actually doing anything about them. This is my chance my roll of the dice to see if my colleagues would like someone like me to step up and speak on their behalf and serve them and represent them. And if they do, great. And if they don't, then you know what, that's fine as well. I'll go and do something else. But I think I'm very passionate about supporting the NHS. As you know, it's saved my life twice, and it's something that we need to really preserve and help take care of.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Shan. You know, it's always interesting speaking to you, and I'll be watching your Twitter feed very, very carefully. And I wish you the best, both in the council and in the GP land.
Thank you very much, Hyder. Great to talk to you as always. And hopefully one of the first things I'll do after we've lifted lockdown is get another tea with you.
Yeah. I mean, I do need to come up to the Midlands and see your neck of the woods, definitely.
Yeah, love to have you over.
It's been great, Shan. Thanks a lot.
All right. Take care. Thanks.